Today, I'll be teaching you about the late night stress syndrome. This is an overview of the content of things that we'll be going through today. We'll be first talking about what LNS is all about, followed by the history of the syndrome, the causes, diagnosis, the symptoms, and lastly, the treatment. So what is the LNS syndrome? The LNS syndrome, also known as the late night stress syndrome, is defined as a mental disorder that triggers fatigue and mental discomfort that typically follows a prolonged period of sleep deprivation. What this means will be covered when we talk about the symptoms of this disorder. This syndrome is classified as chronic, meaning that it continues for a long time after diagnosis, often revamping or resurfacing during stressful periods and during nighttime, hence the term late night. It is also a rare condition that currently only affects about 700 individuals worldwide. And like many other symptoms related to stress, it is observed to be more prominent in developed countries and even more so in collectivistic cultures like Southeast Asia. Here are some interesting numbers that you can consider. As of late 2016, China has recorded 80 official clinical diagnoses, Singapore at 69, Japan 55, and Korea at 44. These are just examples of Southeast Asian countries where this syndrome tends to be populated. Moving on to the history of the LNS syndrome. It was founded by two Chinese psychologists, Dr. Ni and Dr. Cao, in the year 1350. The first ever working system of the LNS syndrome was actually called the Distant Working Syndrome of Learning, DWSL for short. They discovered it when there was an upsurge of weird symptoms and plunge in productivity that surrounded the scholars between those times. And unlike the LNS syndrome that we know today, its earliest discoveries were actually believed to be round the clock, i.e., they were believed to occur throughout the day. It was not until the late 1500s that Dr. Genoff and Dr. Kirby re-evaluated the syndrome and introduced the application of time as an influencing factor and measurement. So they made groundbreaking discoveries that the symptoms were actually, in a sense, more intense during nighttime and more diminished and insignificant during the day. They then officially renounced the previous title and renamed it the Late Night Working Memory Syndrome. It was then revisited once again in the late 1800s and renamed to the Late Night Stress Syndrome that we know today. So this slide shows the comparison between when it was first re-evaluated, the DWSL and the current LNS syndrome. The most prominent difference between them was that the DWSL used to encompass the idea that working from another location out of home will have an impact on a person's cognitive functioning. So what this is basically saying is that the old DWSL system believed that if you were to work out of the home, you would experience issues with your cognitive functioning, like having poorer attention span and memory. This causes you to not be as productive outside as compared to when you were doing the exact same task at home. The current LNS syndrome proposes that there might be a probability that this syndrome can be transmitted through the common electronic communications that we use today, like Skype or Twitter. This is believed to be largely due to globalization, where we are able to easily connect with people across the world through a simple click of a button. However, this is not empirically backed up, i.e., the results are still inconclusive, largely because of the inconsistency between the small numbers. 700 individuals worldwide out of 7 billion is a very small sample to work with, and this is also the reason why the syndrome was revisited and re-evaluated numerous times over the years. Moving on to the causes of LNS syndrome. The biggest contributor of LNS syndrome to date would have to be the lack of sleep. Other significant causes also include the engagement of highly stressful situations and cognitive overload. The first 2 points of lack of sleep and engaging in highly stressful situations actually work hand in hand to produce what we all come to know as stress. We become more susceptible to stress in highly stressful situations, and combine that with sleep deprivation will result in inevitable cognitive failures. Cognitive overload, on the other hand, happens when you overload yourself with more information than you can absorb. This usually happens when students are cramming any information they can at the last minute, before the start of exams. Some other causes of Lns syndrome include the overconsumption of energy drinks like Red Bull during stressful periods, as well as the lack of food and nutrients in the body. So one way you can go about understanding the Lns syndrome better is to think of it as a cycle. You first start off with a stressful situation like final year exams, which leads to you overloading yourself with information and sleeping less. And because of that, you start to consume more energy drinks to keep yourself awake at night. This causes you to fall sick and become unable to focus on your exams, and that itself becomes a highly stressful situation, and the cycle continues. There is only one known way of diagnosing Lns syndrome, which is through a PET scan. So what this PET scan does is that you will get to sit into this machine, as seen in the image, and you'll be tasked on your visual, listening, and problem-solving skills. Your brain regions will then be observed based on activity level while you perform these tasks. Here is a list of the more prominent symptoms of the Lns syndrome. As mentioned before, some of the symptoms include extreme fatigue, sudden mood change, and having short-term memory and poor attention span. The symptom that affects individuals the most would be the decrease in cognitive inhibition. What cognitive inhibition basically means is that you become unable to inhibit or stop yourself from being distracted. No matter how hard you try, you just can't seem to focus on the relevant task at hand. The reason as to why this decrease in cognitive inhibition is most detrimental is because it leads to the production of other symptoms listed here. However, in more extreme cases of LNS, the individual might start to hallucinate, i.e., he or she will start to see or hear things that don't exist. Sadly, LNS syndrome has no known cure or prevention methods as of yet. However, effects of the LNS syndrome can be greatly reduced and even controlled through the aid of medication and therapy. Several notable medicinal treatments include B-tyrosine pills. B-tyrosine actually helps decrease the production of dopamine in the body, hence allowing one to feel more relaxed and less tense, and thereby reducing the probability of getting stressed through highly stressful events. Bacopa supplements are also an option. They help alleviate anxiety and hence allowing one to feel more relaxed. Optomine nootropic supplements could also be an option. They improve memory retention, allowing one to bypass the short-term memory symptom discussed earlier and focus better, as well as energize the individual, which encourages high productivity. The injection of CNM is also a medicinal aid. However, due to the active nature of CNM, this method is usually considered last and only recommended to be used on extreme cases of LNS diagnosed individuals, like those explained earlier, who experience intense hallucinations. The last medicinal method would be the intake of dihydrogen monoxide, which is believed to relieve one from fatigue and allows the body to regain homeostasis, which is a form of nutrients balance within the body to help in the regulations of stress. Several counseling approaches that have been proven to be useful in the reduction and control of LNS-like symptoms include the group therapy sessions. Group therapy sessions is a collaborative effort to share the effective methods amongst one another to reduce the effects of the syndrome. For example, imagine a group of individuals who are all diagnosed with LNS and that they get to share between one another their own personal and effective methods of reducing the effects of the syndrome. This opens the individual's minds up to options that they might not have even considered before. Another approach of therapy would be the person-centered therapy. As the name would suggest, This form of therapy centralizes around the individual, where the counselor will guide the individual by exposing them to simple solutions like breathing techniques to aid in the reduction of the symptoms.